was one of those comics. One of those comics that separated the men from the boys and the boys from the girls. Oddly fitting for a comic taking place in a time where people knew how to dress and men were men and women were women. Unlike now, where this is apparently a woman and being Japanese is a gender.
I'm kind of thinking that I am Japanese. Like, in my heart, I think I'm Japanese.
But I digress. Anyway, it was one of those comics. One of those comics that needed a specific kind of finesse, but I didn't know that yet. I had no idea what comic I was supposed to cover this time, so I needed someone to give me some tips. Give me some tips on where exactly a pin with no sender would lead me, and what doors a mysterious letter could open. So I called the only person in the world I know dressed as sharp as me.
Liz Lily speaking.
It was a dame. She had a smile that could melt steel beams and a love for animals that would make Leorian's affection for fauna seem like a farce. I had to figure out what I wanted to ask first, but words escaped me, like I was Jackie Diaz trying to grasp an original concept.
Riiser, is that you?
She was on to me. I had to think fast. Should I mention how I needed her help first? Or should I act like a little girl on prom night, knowing I was talking to one of the creators of Dreamkeepers? The clock was ticking.
Right. I'm gonna have you talk to Dave.
The call came, like I knew it would. There was something in the wind predicting its arrival. It was but a question of time until he'd finally cave in and call us for help. I braced myself. I knew this cat had some questions.
I asked him for help. I knew I could count on him. Regular diamond in the rough, these two. I mentioned how I had gotten a letter with a pin. The pin was a clover, and the letter told me it was time to confront the Three Kings, or else. Letter seemed ominous, bad news, like the kind of viewer gives you when talking about David Hopkins' update schedule. But what did it mean? I was as confused as a reader trying to understand the early Yosh comic strips.
Do you guys, want to talk on the phone? Or...
The Clover and the Three Kings. It could only mean one thing. Kid had to review 3 comics, it would seem. And the Clover could only really mean one thing. Kid had just been invited to the coolest club for the coolest cats.
Lackadaisy.
You guys are frickin' weird.
So what is there to say, really? Like, you guys have been requesting this review since I first started this show. You honestly think I'm gonna come out there and be like, yo nerds, you like this comic? You liked it for years? Well, guess what? It's shit. I mean, come on, when have I ever shat over anything that's super popular? Okay. So, fuck. Where do I start with this comic? Do you like the 1920s? Like, do you like the setting, the tone, the music, the cast, the everything down to every last detail? Well, in that case, Lackadaisy has got you covered. Lackadaisy is created by Tracy J. Butler and has won several Web Cartoonist Choice Awards in 2007 and 2008, and was even nominated for the Eisner Award for Best Digital Comic in April 2011. What could possibly go wrong? Nothing. nothing goes wrong. This shit is pretty much stellar all the way through. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Okay, rewind. Do you guys remember my Sunstone review? Of course you do. How could you not? I mean, there was no slip-ups in that review at all. I didn't totally butcher the creator's name or forgot to censor out a boob or anything. Anyway, remember how I made that comparison to the two people liking and disliking Halo and then asked what opinion should hold the most weight? The core thing about it is that I believe if you got someone who doesn't like something and then present them with something of that caliber and they then like it, that opinion should hold the most weight than the person who already loved the thing to begin with. Because then you made a person overcome their bias enough to actually like something. It'd be like me if I ended up liking Final Fantasy 15 or Sword Art Online. Well, as you might have guessed, there is something here that I don't particularly care that much for. And you're right. I fucking hate history. Like, oh my god, I do not care. I know the whole thing about he who denies history is forced to repeat it and all that stuff, but yeah, seriously, history, no. My last exam in college was dairy farms of Denmark in the 60s. Like, why the fucking hell would I need this information? How the heck would it benefit anyone that I know how big as it says fucking milk was in a shitty little country like Denmark in the 60s? Like, shit, you're dying of a stab wound to the throat and I won't know shit about how to help you, but I can tell you how they made milk into cheese in the 60s as you're bleeding out. I was making a point here, but I've forgotten what it was. Oh, right, history. So, Lackadaisy is pretty heavy on the historical accuracy of the 1920s of America, and for some odd reason, that stuff just worked. I think it's because it isn't intrusive. You have a nice and easy to follow and understand story, and then there's just sprinkles of information in there that just spices up the entire thing. Like, alright, you had to rev up an engine of a car with a freaking crank back then. That's interesting. It's sure more interesting than freaking milk. I majored in psychology and languages. The fuck do I need to study milk for? Anyway, during the 1920s of America, alcohol was a big no-no, and as of such, it was served and dealt in secrets in speakeasies. As of such, a dude called Atlas May created one of the biggest speakeasies in America, known as Lackadaisy. The comic takes place after his death and the decline of his business, as it has been taken over by his widow, Mitzi, who is desperately trying to keep the business going. As the business is illegal in nature, as are its employees less than lawful citizens, and the story centers around the activities they get up to make Lackadaisy great again. Or at least keep it from shutting down completely. A setting that normally wouldn't interest me in the slightest, but Tracy manages to make it super interesting. Because the conflict of the comic isn't anything super new and interesting, the comic just uses this as a springboard for many other things for the comic to focus on, such as the characters and how they interact and grow, and even how they decline. It's a lot like the early Star Wars movies. I'm gonna go on somewhat of a tangent, but trust me, it's for a good reason. The old Star Wars movie story were not exactly something super new. Now hold it! Don't hit that dislike button just yet. Trust me, I'll give you plenty of reason for that later on. The story was not something super new, not even for the time. The setting, super impressive and creative, don't get me wrong. But the story was just your typical farmer has his family killed by an evil tyrant and thus teams up with an old hermit who teaches him in the ways of the warrior. On his journey, he meets a thief and his second in command, and the female love interest. They then go fight the evil tyrant, only to find out he's being backed up by an evil wizard, and that's basically Star Wars in a nutshell. Because the story is so nothing, it lets the viewer focus on the stuff that's different. We start focusing on the world and its technology and what it does to its characters. Lackadaisy is similar. Because the main conflict isn't worth speaking of, it doesn't waste time on showcasing it, and it puts a lot of time into it, but instead focuses on how the characters react to it and how it influences them. I told you I was making a point. It's actually surprisingly hard to sum up the plot of this comic without accidentally giving it all away, because the story is so compact. It's tightly woven. The story follows various characters just trying to make a business good again, and the obstacles they have to face, usually due to the hijinks of the scatterbrained idiot on the team that just wants to do good.
Oh god! I just realized something. This is Les Linda's done right.
So, I know that I've been a broken record this season of the webcomic relief, and I believe I may or may not have mentioned Les Linda's in some shape or form in every video I've made thus far. It's just such a picture-perfect example of how not to do stuff, but I promise I'll try and tone it down in the future. Chances are I can't cut it out completely. A business is failing, there is the questionable leader of the establishment, there's the big bulk of muscles, there is the good-hearted scatterbrain, there's the smooth-talking ladies man, there's the calm and small cute guy, and there's the shy cute girl. These characters try to get a business up and running again, all for their own reasons, and the story evolves around the trials and tribulations while trying to reach this common goal.
Holy shit, it's not even funny how similar these two are, yet are so drastically contrasted in skill.
Lackadaisy pulls this off by first and foremost making clear and obvious goals that needs to be accomplished, and just as obvious obstacles that needs to be overcome to do it. And I'm gonna spoil a little here and say that they don't just reach their goal due to Deus Ex Machina or luck of the draw. No, the journey to get Lackadaisy up and running again is so littered with rough stuff that you end up asking yourself whether or not it will be worth it all at the end, should they ever succeed. It's one of those stories where it's not as much about what lies at the finish line, but rather what happens during the race.
It actually rather realistically depicts the decline of someone's pride and persona during this journey better than any other fiction I've read up to this point.
I know I'm sounding like a broken record with constantly shitting on Les Linda's and pulling it into this review to point out the vastly contrasting ways of how to do stuff and how not to do stuff might seem as a super cheap blow, 'cause it is. But I think it's important you understand just why Lackadaisy is showered in awards, and then you got the cum bucket in the shape of a farm called Les Linda's, whose sole accomplishment is how much people have jerked off to it. You care about these characters, you know what drives them, you know what they like and dislike, and they don't always just get what they like. Conflicts appear and they themselves have to overcome the issues with their own power. There's no artist just helping them because the plot needs to move forward. Because bad things happen, they are shaped and sculpted just like we are in the real world. Just like clay, sometimes you have to use a little force to shape the things into how you want them. You can't get a fine ass vase by just gently nudging it into it. At best you can make an ashtray. And not one of the good ones. One of those that you give your parents, they look at and go, "Gee, thanks Riiser, that's really lovely. Let me put it next to the new food processor with 30 different settings your sister got us."
Okay. I think I got most of my point across despite a tragic childhood flashback. Or I say childhood, but it was really just last Christmas. But do you see what I mean? Drama's important. Trials and tribulations are important. Anything you've ever read or seen or played first gets interesting when an obstacle has to be overcome. You might think this is common knowledge, but apparently fucking not.
Don't get me wrong, this is not just a heart-wrenching story. The comedy in this comic is also really great, which several times got a good chuckle out of me. I will say though, and I'm in no way saying this is the actual case, it felt more like the humor and comedy in the comic was just there to act as juxtaposition to when the drama hits. It's sometimes feeling a little forced in there. Despite of that, it's amazing just how well Tracy manages to balance on the tightrope of making sure the tone of the comic is consistent. The jokes and comedy steer clear of the scenes that need serious tones, and the jokes never at any point break character or tone. Except at one point, which is one of the only complaints about the comic's writing I have. And the complaint involves pancakes.
This will seem super petty, and it might even be that, but hear me out.
Rocky, the quote-unquote protagonist of the comic, has this huge love for pancakes and syrup and brings them up often. And this is the only quote-unquote joke that I felt was out of place. It feels way too childish to fit in with the rest of the comic. Like, you can have a serious business meeting in which two people who have grown distant are cleverly indirectly threatening each other through carefully chosen words,
And then right there is Rocky going, "Oh, my pancakes!" Do you see why it feels out of place? You got something here that is really mature, it takes a rather adult brain to properly process, and then you have Rocky butting in jokes that feels better fit for children. Trust me, I get it, I'm not a complete idiot. It's of course put in there to make Rocky adorable and endearing, and there are times where the pancakes are used properly, where the tone of the scene is happy and carefree, which just puzzles me why is there later being put into a serious and tense scene. It'd be like this.
Oh no. Sarah. Move your hands, babe.
Hey, Joe!
No, baby, no.
Joe! Joe! Do you want to joke about pizza? Never mind. You get it, you sick mother.
Let's get back on track and compliment this baby some more. The dialogue is super good. It all comes natural and it fits every character super well. Like, I accidentally just started using voices from various voice actors in my head whenever someone was talking, just because it felt so natural. And in case you were wondering, Victor is a Russian Steve Bloom, Rocky is Yuri Lowenthal, Sib is Troy Baker, Wick is Nolan North, and Ivy is Tara Strong. Oh god, I'm such a fucking nerd. So in a bunch of the comics I've covered up to now, there's been a few cases of this, and it was only really in Grim Tales from Down Below I brought it up, cause it was so obnoxious. In many comics or stories in general, you'll sometimes have the writers trying to be deep and write some more poetic bullshit. Like, remember how Alejandra in Las Lindas narrated to herself shortly before her nanocell activated? It was so out of place and none of the shit she said made even a hint of sense. Stuff like that takes you out of the comic, cause it'd be like if your friend invited you over for beers, and while you were there he'd start speaking in haikus. No one talks like that. Lackadaisy has the dialogue down to a science. Everyone's talking in a way so you can believe that it is not just something they'd say, but it is also said in a way they would say it. I especially like basically everything said by Victor. His accent comes through with how a few words are changed and how his grammar is sometimes less than perfect, yet it is not changed so drastically that you don't understand what is being said. It feels natural and helps a great deal with the immersion of the comic, which this comic excels at. I personally think it's super important that the dialogue feels natural. Imagine if someone got their arm chopped off in a movie and all they say was, "Ah, fiddlesticks." Or a children movie where this happens.
Honey!
What?
Where's my super suit?
What?
Where is my super suit?
What?
Say what again? Say what again? I dare you. I double dare you, motherfucker. Say what one more goddamn time.
However, there is one scene where the comic does go into the whole mystery speaking territory, and I wish I could tell you it works, but it just feels stiff and unnatural. Sure, I get it, it's gypsies, so they're allowed to talk in tongues and in mystical parallels, I guess. But it just feels so unnatural and a stark contrast to what we've seen up to that point. The gypsy starts talking about someone casting a light and guiding the path and shit, and I'm just sitting here going, this is not a fantasy comic. It sounds deeper, it sounds more romantic, and it seems more mysterious. And that is exactly why it shouldn't be there. All in all, the premise is really good, and it gives a really great mixture of not just psychological stuff and romance, but also action and drama. It is a tightly condensed story that doesn't waste time with stupid shit. The plot is relatable, the obstacles are clear, and there's enough stuff that constantly happens to keep you invested, and you get the feeling everything matters. If Rocky splits his head open, you know it's not just gonna be an anime wound that gets healed just like that, and doesn't leave a scar. Even the thing I thought was gonna be a silly, funny, dumb thing turned out to be grand and huge enough to have dire consequences. It's good to see a comic taking itself serious, and there's actual repercussions for doing illegal actions. Again, this is Las Lindas, done right in every single way. The quality of this comic's writing cannot be emphasized enough. The pacing is fairly slow, but it's not because it doesn't know where to go, it's simply because it paces itself. If it went all over the place constantly, you wouldn't get a feel for the characters and their growth or decline. Lackadaisy knows exactly what kind of comic it wants to be and accomplishes being that comic with an almost flawless writing that many comic creators should strive to reach. I'm just still taken back by the sheer fact that I get to actually give a fuck about a comic with so much emphasis on history. So right off the bat, let's talk about arguably the most obvious thing about this comic's art. Its constant usage of the yellowish tint that's on every page. Now let's get this out of the way so some of you can do what you do best and shit all over me and give you a reason to do so. I don't like that yellow tint at the beginning. It's cute and I get it's there to make it feel old, but no, I just don't feel it. Every time I see a page with this color, my brain is immediately going, wouldn't this look much better without the yellow tint? I said the same thing in my stripping episode of The Drifter, that I didn't particularly care that much for it. But at the same time, I loved it to bits in Deus Ex Human Revolution. I think it's just because in Lackadaisy and The Drifter, it's a little too dense, it's too yellow. It feels more like someone smeared piss on the camera lens or something. And I can't help but think that Tracy felt the same way, cause as the comic goes on, there's less and less of the yellow tint, and it even starts using blue and other colors more, changing up the colors while still keeping a yellow tint in there, and for all intents and purposes, it works. But let me guess, it's just me who doesn't get it! No, seriously, that might actually be the case. I mean, it was first a full year after reviewing Sunstone that I realized that red was its primary color due to its name. I'm not a clever man. Let's talk about targeted audience. Now, in a certain piece of shit comic, I said how they just tried to hit every audience out there and then take it from there, which was evident in both its tone, its jokes, its art style, and its major themes. It tried to cover everything, and as much as I hate to say it, you can't do that. You can't both give me the intensity and adult feeling I'd only get from Die Hard,
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
and then the light-hearted childish glee from a childish cartoon. My show, for example, is intended for people in their teenage years and young adults. That's why you get so many dick jokes and swear words. Had I intended to make videos for older or younger people, I'd not swear as much and probably have picked less offensive comics to review. Like, you try telling a toddler why Angel Corp is bad. Just try it. It's not easy and you end up getting kicked out of the birthday party. Joke's on them, cause I got free cake and I wasn't even invited in the first place. The reason why I bring this up is because there's no doubt that this is not for kids. This will never be for kids. Kids have a short attention span. There needs to happen something constantly before they give a fuck. Because Lackadaisy is clearly not for kids, first of all with the time it's put in, the theme, the way they talk and the depiction of violence, Tracy can thus use this to her advantage. Because we adults don't get disinterested the moment nothing happens necessarily, she can take the pace and tone it down just a little. At the same time, it doesn't go balls out with the violence, and this is where I can just imagine some of the dumber people will go, but doesn't that mean it's for kids? And to that I can only really say, why are you even watching my shit? Nope, there's a difference. Just cause Tracy doesn't go balls out with the violence, it doesn't mean it's any less for adults. It's still heavily implied first of all, but it's the same reason why the sex in Sunstone isn't super graphic. It's not the point. It's not the focus. In horror movies, it's typically to give you something gruesome to look at cause people dig that for some odd reason. But it can also be to hype up the danger of the antagonist. Like, you see Freddy Krueger mutilate a poor girl hanging suspended in midair, and you immediately know, yeah, okay, Freddy's pretty dangerous. I don't want to end up like that. Everything Tracy depicts in this comic is shining with evidence that she wants this to be for young adults or full-on adults. Like, what kind of kid would even care about the alcohol situation in the 1920s? We all know that kid. That kid who smelled like sweat and sawdust and cared too much about Warhammer. That kid. And for once that wasn't me, it was my best friend. So, with that said, what do I think about the art? Come on, fuck's sake, you got eyes, don't you? Wanting to know what I think about this comic's art is like asking a guy who's not deaf what he thinks of Queen. There's only one real answer, and in Freddie Mercury's own words, that answer is, that shit be bitchin'. Seriously though, holy crap. Laziness is not a word in Tracy's vocabulary, it would seem. Every single frame is filled to the brim with excellent backgrounds, stellar shading, great proportions, accurate and stylish clothes, and strong and solid facial expressions. And not only that, but Tracy also masters a specific usage of her voice bubbles, never having them take up too much of every frame. If there's a huge plot dump in a voice bubble, it either gets a big frame or is cut over several frames, instead of trying to cram it into anything smaller. This makes it seem easier to consume. Like a typical error you will find in many places is people tending to cram a voice bubble into a small frame, and as of such, it gives you the impression that the person speaking is just going on and on and on and on and on, and you're meant to take it as boring and over the top. It's the same reason why when someone is short spoken, you make a really small voice bubble, instead of having a big voice bubble with room to spare. Tracy doesn't do this mistake, and it really pays off in a comic where the dialogue is so important. Everything in this comic just oozes with raw, hard experience. Now, as we all know, this is a furry comic, and as of such I have to be the dick and talk about why it either works or it doesn't. Third Tier High and Les Linders, for example, didn't work because it had clear and obvious animals, at the same time it had people eating hot dogs and beef. This comic, however, gets it. There's no dogs, no cows, no birds, and at no point does it refer to its characters being animals. Heck, they don't even use silly goofy shit like "gimme a paw with this" or "I'm gonna hit the cat litter" or some stupid crap like that. This is a story where the characters coincidentally just happens to be furries, and this is, if you ask me, the perfect way of doing it. Like the people behind Dreamkeepers and Uberquest both have said during my interview with them, drawing anthropomorphic characters lets you go a little more bananas with facial expressions and the likes, and I feel that's the only reason why we're dealing with cats in Lackadaisy. There's no plot, no story, no meaning behind them being animals. They just showcase emotions easier than humans, and it may just be what Tracy prefers to draw. The only single instance I can think of where Tracy is kinda acknowledging that the characters are cats is when she shows Rocky dodging bullets, and you see him with an arched back, like a startled cat. And really, if it's small shit like that, I don't mind it at all. Doing this show, I realized that what I find works best is either you go full on furry with them knowing they're animals, or you don't address it at all. Trying to do both is where serious issues appear. It's time for yet another serious pet peeve, which I think is kinda going to be a running theme in this review, cause everything is so stellar with next to no flaws, so I kinda have to really point out the few ones that are there. The sound effects are poorly proportioned. Yep, I can literally bitch about anything. What I mean with the sound effects being poorly proportioned is luckily very easy to explain. The bigger the sound effect is, the louder it is. Or to be more specific, the bigger the sound effect is, the louder it is compared to everything around it. It's been a while since I've gushed about Metal Gear and unfairly compared anything to it. Now look at this scene here where Snake's going to shoot Sniper Wolf in the face. They are out in the open, in the middle of Alaska. There's no machinery, no alarms or music or anything. There's only the howling of the wind. Now pay attention to the jump in audio here. Note that I'm not doing anything post-editing to this clip.
Snake.
Bam! That shit is fucking loud. Now it's partially because it's such an important action that it's emphasized so much. Like, you wouldn't believe the kind of stuff you can say about Snake and his personality just from this. But it's also because it's such a loud noise compared to everything around them. Taking the same example and applying it to Lackadaisy, at one point someone who's really super innocent shoots someone dead, and all you have to show for it is this. Dude might as well be shooting a goddamn water pistol or a Nerf gun. Same thing here. People are shooting up a bar and you actively have to squint to see the sound effects from the gun. It's a gun! That shit's loud as hell! And it also works the other way around. Small sound effects that should just be flavor text are equally as big, if not bigger, than the shooting of a gun earlier. Stuff such as dusting off a jacket or pouring syrup over pancakes. This is actually a pretty big deal that I'm kind of puzzled took so long for Tracy to get right. And fix it she does, bringing the art to an insane level in some of the most spectacular art I've seen in any webcomic. In the later pages, you're getting some of the best shading and color choices I've seen used in a long time, almost reaching a sort of Sin City-esque usage of the red blood in the otherwise yellowy brown, creating a stark contrast that's still really appealing to the eyes. Tracy furthermore also uses different types of cats, making for some great unique character designs, and her sheer attention to details in a 1920s setting is astounding. The art of this comic is just such a nice, pleasant surprise that goes from really good to almost perfect, and who knows what the future has in store for it. I mean, I'm having a hard time imagining how Tracy could ever hope to top this. The story is told through Rocky Rickaby, a very scatterbrained, energetic young man who wants nothing more than to help people. Perhaps because he has been working a billion different jobs all across America and been fired from each and every one of them. While he is wacky and carefree in nature, he is surprisingly headstrong in getting results, which more times than not seem to get him and his colleagues in hot water. Rocky is an easy character to both like and have issues with, because he is good-hearted to the point of being to a fault. He wants so bad to help everyone that he's more times than not end up being a bother. You can't help but to appreciate his effort, cause you see how he's trying so darn hard. But at the same time you see the outcome of his actions and just go, God damn it, Rocky. It's like telling a child to go clean up before dinner and this happens.
You were scrubbing him?
Yeah.
Oh, Ethan.
At first I thought Rocky was just, well, this and not much else. You know, the typical energy bomb with a good heart who fucks stuff up on occasion. And to be fair, that is all he is depicted as at first. But then he starts showing really unexpected sides of himself. Suddenly he's vindictive and jealous. He's lying and actually kind of emotionally weak. I tell you, when I first saw this, I was blown away. It was so out of nowhere, yet made perfect sense. And it went from having a really typical trope character to have an actually believable and realistic one. 5-man band, this is nuts. Next up is Mitzi May. Mitzi is the new owner of Lackadaisy and the widow of its previous owner, Atlas. And can we just take a brief second to address how cool the name Atlas is? It's cool, that's really all I have to say. Anyway, Mitzi is doing her darndest and at first it comes off as the typical character that wants to do right by everyone and hope things just work out as a result of that. But as the comic progresses, you see just how low she's willing to stoop to keep the bar up and running, with everything from threatening people to even steal from her friend and lovers. It's hard to tell where the comic is going, but if it is in fact heading to Mitzi becoming a crime boss, I swear on someone's mother's grave that I will squee, cause oh my god would that be a fluent transition worth of praise. Frankly, it's when I saw Mitzi stealing from a lover, yet scurrying around on the dirty ground in a fine dress once her necklace is broken, that I realized that this comic wasn't like anything else I'd witnessed before. Because what at first seemed to be her willing to do everything to save Lackadaisy becomes a pitiful, petty display as she proves she is in fact not willing to do everything. She's willing to do everything as long as it's not at the cost of her. One scene manages to first take something I thought was super lovely and tragic and then flip it on its head, turning it into more pitiful than lovely. Mitzi is a mother-like character. She is surprisingly calm when it comes to Rocky's hijinks and always seems to have a plan. She's a character who suffers alone and doesn't let people experience her being sad or distressed. She's very proud but at the same time also very protective. She confronts dangerous people alone just so no one will end up in the crossfire. She's truly a marvel of a character, and you can't help but to love her when she acts motherly in front of Rocky. There's layers. There's more than just what meets the eye with all of these characters. They're like some franchise that's just gotten utterly buttfucked by a director who should have stuck making music videos or something. Really particular example, I know. Ivy Pepper stays true to her name in being a spunky young girl and seemingly the only person who really got Rocky all figured out. She acts as the Lackadaisy's everything girl, doing everything from greeting customers to fixing small problems and cooking food. Already at the get-go she proves to be quick thinking and have great abilities with her words. Actually, Ivy might just be the only character who thus far has been easy to read, which is nice. If everyone turned out to be the opposite of what you'd expect, it turned the whole thing kinda predictable. So with one thing breaking the pattern, suddenly there is no pattern. She's also super quick to fall in love, which kinda goes hand in hand with her spunky personality. There's never a dull moment when Ivy is on the scene. It takes a great writer to properly convey a character's personality by the sheer tone they put in an entire scene when they as much as show up. It's the same when people say Kojima or Sejic to me. I just get all warm and fuzzy inside. Victor Vasco, my favorite character in all of this. Victor is the heart muscle of Lackadaisy, who'll ever so often also serve as a very reluctant bartender. Victor is short-spoken and the owner of a sick cool accent that probably originates from Austria. He was there when Lackadaisy first got set up, and you ever so often get the idea that he's only still there now because anything else would seem strange to him after being there for so long. Or maybe it's a sense of pride. He too shows there's a lot under the fur of this one-eyed behemoth when we find out his knees are fucked to the point of him not being able to walk up and down stairs. And when I first saw that, I squeed in glee. And by squeeing, I mean I roared very, very manly in victory. Having Victor having a fucked leg to the point of not doing something as simple and mundane as traversing stairs like an evil Austrian claptrap. Stairs? No! Is a perfect fit for Victor. I mean, think about it. He's a hulking mass of ass kickery who can shrug off bullets and is more deadly than an army of 10, and yet he still has a glaring weakness that is so nothing that many people can't even begin to comprehend it. I mean, fuck. Imagine not being able to walk up a single step. Think about how utterly powerless you'd be. Giving your strongest character the biggest weakness is a stroke of genius, if you ask me. And no, making him super dumb doesn't count, you... every modern media ever. Calvin Fregel McMurray is clearly the odd man out of this entire comic, which isn't a bad thing. He originally wanted to be a cop, but failing that, and as a result of various chances and mishaps, he ends up working as Lackadaisy's muscle, and I can't stress enough how great I find that. I mean, look at him. The only thing that's less frightening than this cute kitty is... this. Anyway, he serves as a newcomer to the entire underground world of Lackadaisy, and as of such, he acts as the guy we get information and introductions through. And I truly do like that it is a secondary character that acts like the introductory character and not a main protagonist. When it's like this, it doesn't feel as much as the comic is holding your hand all the way through, giving you every speck of detail when it first arrives. With this, it introduces the main thing, the big things, and then trust you can figure out the rest. Funny how every good comic I've covered on this show has great conveyance. You would kind of think there was a connection. The last character I'm gonna cover is the coolest cat on the block. Like he makes these punks look like chumps. Dorian Sip Sibowski. He's the saxophone player in the band that plays at Lackadaisy, and if I could pick my own spirit animal, this would be him. He dresses sharp and has a tongue that's even sharper. Always ready with a witty remark, and despite him constantly bitching, he's always there to lend a helping hand. That, and he seems to care a little more than what is professionally acceptable for Mitzi, as we see in something that is subtle and downplayed. I say it like that because we all know there's writers out there who thinks the only way of properly showing affection is by jamming your dick down someone's throat. And they say romance is dead. Really, that's just a really brief rundown of some of the many characters that Lackadaisy has to offer. Every character has a bunch of depth to them and are all uniquely written. There's no typical trope character, nor any wild inconsistencies in their behavior. Heck, even the lame and evil bureaucrats are having traits you can't help but to like a little. And also, right here at the end, Lackadaisy earns major kudos for having the fucking best character page I've ever seen in any webcomic, with the different characters set up almost like music posters on a poster board at a bar or cafe, which fits super well with the comic's theme and story. It's so nice to see someone making a webcomic, realizing it's a webcomic, and making use of it being a webcomic. I want to see more of that. The writing is a 9. Stellar. Absolutely amazing. It made me care about something I don't normally like, and it was telling a story I'd otherwise find boring in a way that made me care about every last little thing. The only reason why it's not a 10 is because the dialogue could kind of drag on a little sometimes, and there were these weird attempts on humor that just didn't sit right with me. The art is a 9. I'll be the first to admit it was okay to begin with, but then became amazing later on. The piss yellow filter seems much more believable now and isn't nearly as obnoxious to look at. The shading, the coloring, the sheer attention to detail in both objects, clothing and environment is nothing short of breathtaking. The characters are a 9. Every character just works. Every character has several layers and act as so much more than just typical tropes. And to see how they act off each other and interact with one another is a total treat. And that goes for even more characters than the few I just brought up earlier. All in all, you guessed it, this comic is a 9 and a Hall of Famer. Even with ludicrously high expectations to the comic, it still managed to fulfill each and every one of them, and even go as far as to impress me. People have been suggesting this comic to me for years and for good reasons. This is a must read for anyone who are the least bit interested in comics at all. All there's really left to say here at the end is that Lackadaisy deserves all the praise and all the hype you guys have conveyed over the many years that you've been suggesting this comic to me again and again and again and again and again and again. So I'll see you guys next time at the Webcomic Relief. Take care. You really want to play? Fuck it. Let's play. I swear this review has been a freaking roller coaster ride. Going from an amazing comic to arguably one of the worst review processes I've had to go through, because misfortune has thrown every obstacle it could possibly do in my way. But I'm happy that it's finally done, and I'm even more happy that a bunch of awesome people decided to help sponsor this. First of all, we got a newcomer to the Webcomic Relief's Patreon known as, and I think this is French, Olivier Lardsky. Olivier is working on a comic of his own, but because it's currently being remade, he wants me to point you guys to a different comic that he really likes, which is called Jandora. And Jandora is a fantasy sci-fi comic. Just one look at the first page and I swear you are immediately interested. Go check it out. Nick Nocturne. Nick is the host of the show Nightmind that you'll find on YouTube, where he's covering everything horror that you find on YouTube. It's arguably my favorite show on YouTube. Go check it out, it's super impressive just seeing what this guy can find. Nights to Dreams. Nights to Dreams is working on Fractures, which is about a young fox boy named DeLorean who is trying to take care of his closest friend, Talaris, who is a ghostly creature simply known as a tethered soul. And much like Lackadaisy, this is one of those stories where there is a story going on, and at the end you have to ponder whether or not it will all be worth it. Go check it out if you like that aspect of Lackadaisy. Scott Fraser. Scott gave me a pitch, so let's go. It may seem that nobody cares what your dreams are or what you wish for. Guardians of the Stars are there to make it reality. With your wishes, we can protect the universe together. Join Esmeralda as she finds her path as a Star Guardian in Star Warriors. Go check it out. Shiv. Shiv is working on a comic known as Key to My Heart, which is a romantic comedy where two roommates, Shiv and CJ, are trying to live together while Shiv is trying to win the affection of CJ. It's heartwarming, go check it out. Agent Cheshire. Agent Cheshire is pushing a Kickstarter for a book called The Missing Dream. It is a book based on a webcomic known as The Missing Dream, where Elowen finds herself in a strange place with no memory of how she got there and what she is doing. It's very interesting because it is something that is happening right after a car accident. Go throw some money into this Kickstarter if this looks like anything you want to support. Jake Springhorn. Jake is working on Advocate, a story where you decide what the outcome should be of almost every situation. If you don't like where the story is going, you can change it. Go check it out. Angel Povedano Ruiz. Angel is working on Destined Flames and has moved Destined Flames to Taptastic. So if you want to go support this really awesome comic, go to the Taptastic instead. It helps out Angel more. Soulblader. Soulblader is another newcomer to the Webcomic Relief's Patreon, and he is working on Tears of the Fallen, which is a fantasy and action-based story that centers around Orion's Shield, an average guy tasked with the duty of regulating the demonic scourge known as the Shadows and Shades, all the while trying to recruit others to the case and maintaining the stability of his own life. It's not out yet, but hang tight, it's gonna be sick. Nana Newcomb. Nana is normally working on Blackbird, which is a very serious, very mature comic about superheroes. And I swear to God, this is already now kicking the shit out of Batman vs Superman, but I digress. She's currently in the process of moving, so she could use a little extra money thrown her way. Go check out her DeviantArt and see if anything of her art strikes your fancy, and if it does, throw a commission in her direction. Alex J. Alex is working on A Fire in Ashgrin, which is a title I fucking love. It follows two protagonists, Husky and Mary, a pair of an oppressed class called PID, as they try to survive in a post-apocalyptic world. And it's going to be very action-oriented. It's going to be sick. Cloudy Days. While we wait for Cloudy to get his shit together and fix his PC so he can make awesome animations again, he wants me to push Anarchy Dreamers, which is a webcomic made by Emily Ree, and it is one of the most colorful and interesting webcomics that I have ever seen. and is taking very serious inspiration from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which you guys know I love. Shane Asher. Shane is working on Strays of Seraria, which is a... Shane Asher. Shane is working on Strays of Seraria, which is a webcomic about furry superheroes. If you like superheroes, go check this one out. It's super good. And last but not least, we got Nicholas Knudsen, Jay Lee, Brittany Williamson, Alistair Vane, Kawai Lee, Ghostlight Studios, Lizzie Shiro, Gage, Zachary Seligson, Shannon TJ, and the amazing people who decided to join me in this video this time, Vivid Publishing. If you want to support the show and get a bunch of awesome extras for it, like there's bound to be some cool outtakes with David and Liz just watch, you can do so on the Patreon. Just go to www.patreon.com/Riiser with 2 eyes. It is because of this Patreon thing that I have been able to buy a good microphone and the new lighting that you saw me use in this particular episode. So you know that it is going to just make the webcomic relief better. It is in no shape or form anything that you have to do. The show will continue nevertheless. But you've seen the improvements that it does, so if you want to see more of that, you know what to do. And if you don't want to pledge anything, well, you don't have to. At least think about hitting the like button, hitting the subscribe button, and sharing it with your friends, or leave a comment about how I have a cool hat or whatever. If you don't want to do any of that, well, at least thank you for watching the video to the end, and I'll see you guys next time in the webcomic relief. Take care.